Welcome, everyone. I was just giving everybody a few seconds to be able to log in. But welcome to our 5:30 Plant Powered Challenge webinar. My name is Chris, and I'm one of the health coaches on the lifestyle medicine team at Corewell Health. Tonight's webinar the topic is anti-inflammatory eating, and we are joined today by Dr. Zach Cadro, who is a naturopathic physician, research scientist, and public health professional. Dr. Cadro sees patients at Corewell Health in Southeast Michigan and in private practice through Emcura Integrative Medicine. Dr. Cadro's clinical focus is integrative oncology, and he also sees patients with a wide variety of general health concerns. Dr. Cadro holds a Bachelor in General Studies from the University of Michigan, a Master of Public Health from the University of North Carolina, and a Doctor of Naturopathic Medicine from Bastyr University in Seattle, Washington. Dr. Cadro has worked at several oncology centers and has co-authored numerous scientific manuscripts in peer-reviewed journals, abstracts, and articles in the field of integrative medicine with a focus on integrative oncology. As a naturopathic physician, Dr. Cadro encourages the body's self-healing processes using nutrition, mind-body medicine, natural therapies, and lifestyle changes, drawing on both traditional healing modalities and modern medical science. Dr. Cadro completed the eCornell certificate in plant-based nutrition, as did I, have that in common, and is passionate about promoting the role of nutrition in transforming the health of our nation. We're happy to have you here, Dr. Cadro. And
Thank you so much.
you're welcome. I'm going to pass it over to you so you can share your slides and all this great information.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you to everybody on the Plant Powered Challenge team for inviting me out today to talk to you about anti-inflammatory eating. And thank you to everybody who has joined our webinar today for this topic. And I'm happy to be here, and I look forward to our time together. Okay. This is just a slide with a little bit of my background. We already went through some of that, so I'm not going to pause on this. I'm going to cruise through it. But if they provide you with the slides from today and you're interested in any more of the details, then it's here.
And Dr. Cadro, I just wanted to interrupt. I forgot to tell everybody to go ahead and put some questions in the Q&A section throughout the presentation today. So some people might have questions for you towards the end of the webinar. So yeah, participants, please feel free to enter some questions in the Q&A section, and I'll try to get to as many of those as I can towards the end. Thank you.
That sounds great. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, and I look forward to the Q&A session. I will definitely save some time for that. All right, I have no conflicts of interest to disclose for this presentation. All right, our objectives for today. So at the end of this presentation, my hope and goal is that you will all be able to understand the basics of acute and chronic inflammation and begin to identify the foods, lifestyle behaviors, and environmental factors that contribute to chronic inflammation. And then also to identify pro-inflammatory foods and also anti-inflammatory foods. Let's start with what is inflammation. So inflammation is the body's natural response to injury or infection. And the purpose of this is to protect and to heal the body. So if we get injured, then the body activates its systems. The immune system causes an inflammatory response and releases a series of chemicals, and then the body uses that response to fight our microbes that could be entering when we get in, or if we get infected with a virus or a bacteria, and then it uses it to heal the tissue. There are two types.
Dr. Cadro, if you can hear me, your audio has cut out. Sorry, everyone. We are having a little bit of technical difficulty.
Okay, so let's start by introducing what inflammation is. So inflammation is the body's natural response to injury or infection. And the purpose is to protect and to heal the body, again, from either from injury or infection. And this process involves the immune system, and the immune system releases a series of chemicals that cause reactions in the body that contribute toward the inflammatory process. And the goal is to fight harmful microbes or to heal tissue. We want to distinguish here between acute and chronic inflammation. And so in acute inflammation, once the injury or infection is healed, then the inflammation resolves. And that's natural and healthy, and that's what we want to happen. Now, in chronic inflammation, this is an abnormal immune response. We're not supposed to have a chronic inflammatory process happening. And when it does not stop when it should. And it can occur without injury or infection. And it's also referred to as systemic inflammation. And in this graphic here, you can see types of acute inflammation. This could be things like an allergic reaction, trauma or injury, burns, frostbite. So those would be kinds of acute inflammation. And then chronic inflammation, we're going to go into this in more detail, but it can happen when cardiovascular disease and these other diseases listed are present, but it can also contribute to the development of several diseases, which we'll talk about more. So the impact of chronic systemic inflammation is that it harms healthy cells, tissues, and organs over time, and it increases the risk of serious diseases. These include things like cancer, heart disease, diabetes, asthma, Alzheimer's disease, and autoimmune conditions. And you can see in this graphic over here the disease promoting chronic inflammation. And you can see the cardiovascular disease listed. It shows the eye, so ocular diseases, autoimmune diseases, which is where the body's own immune system is attacking the body, lung diseases, diseases of the brain, so neurodegenerative diseases, even in the mouth, so chronic inflammation in the gums around the teeth, that's periodontal disease, and a metabolic syndrome. So you can see that a lot of chronic conditions have an underlying cause or etiology in chronic systemic inflammation. So it's a really important topic for our health. And now let's get into some things that cause this chronic or systemic inflammation. We're just going to start with the bird's eye view first, and then we'll get into more details as we progress. So the first thing is infections, and then there are lifestyle choices such as poor diet, lack of exercise, or smoking, and then environmental exposures like pollution or toxins. Some possible signs of chronic inflammation could be brain fog and low energy, poor digestion, low back pain, dry eyes, excess mucus production. Those are some of the signs of chronic inflammation. Now, to dive a little bit deeper into this, so some infection-related causes of chronic inflammation could be things like hepatitis C. This was more of a problem before when people were not screened when they donated blood. And if they were hepatitis C carriers, there was passed around a lot, not so much happening anymore. But cytomegalovirus is another virus that can cause chronic infections. And the introduction of COVID-19, the post-COVID period is associated in some cases with chronic inflammation, and some people after COVID infections will experience chronic inflammation. And then also there's pancreatitis, and that can be caused by obstructed bile ducts. It's linked to alcohol consumption, and it can result in systemic inflammation. Some lifestyle-related causes of chronic inflammation. We talked a little bit about diet already, but we're going to, again, go into more and more details as we progress through the slides. So diets that are high in trans fat, salt, and refined grains, and low in fiber and prebiotics. These are associated with chronic inflammation. Physical inactivity, and then also insufficient sleep or disrupted circadian rhythms. So circadian rhythms refer to the 24-hour light and dark cycles. And so when those are disrupted, like for example, if we're staying up until 2 or 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, sleeping in, we're not on the sleep-wake cycle, that can also affect inflammation in the body. And so this poor guy here on the couch, he's really maybe experiencing all three of these. So he's eating the potato chips, he's not being physically active right there, and he has the remote control in his hand. And so, we know that watching TV and screen time late at night, that can also disrupt sleep. And so this graphic kind of illustrates a lot of these points. And then other lifestyle-related causes of chronic inflammation include stress. So stress can cause the body to release pro-inflammatory cytokines. There's tobacco use. So nicotine and cigarettes can trigger inflammation really all over the body, not just in the lungs, but all over the blood vessels and everywhere that they supply. And then alcohol use. So excessive drinking damages the pancreas, the liver, the gastrointestinal tract, the brain, and the nervous system. And all of these things can, again, lead to systemic inflammation. And then there are environmental related causes of chronic inflammation. And so in this picture here, it might depend on whether you're looking at this on a computer or a phone, but this gentleman here, on his shirt, you can see sort of the lungs and the gastrointestinal tract. They're sort of red, and you can see the factory in the background. And so we know that air pollution uh, exposes people to, well, by definition, pollutants, but those things contribute to chronic and systemic inflammation, and also hazardous waste. So exposure to hazardous waste products, like maybe in the workplace, and then also industrial chemicals, again, which could either be from the environment or people's workplace. And so we know from epidemiological research that people who live in close proximity to, you can see in the background here, a factory that's emitting some kind of smoke. People who live in close proximity to factories that emit pollution, they have higher rates of asthma, cancer, cardiovascular disease, and all sorts of other kinds of health conditions, and also premature mortality and death. And so it's again just a really an important topic to to bring up. All right, and then shifting more toward foods and eating. So foods also contribute to chronic inflammation, and so red meat, such as steak and burgers, processed meat like bologna or bacon and sausage and lunch meat, commercial baked goods, things like snack cakes and pies, cookies and brownies, white bread and other types of products made from white flour, and then also deep fried foods that are cooked in submerged in oil at a very high temperature. Things like French fries and fried chicken and donuts. All of these can contribute to chronic inflammation. And additional foods that contribute to chronic inflammation, you can see the soda pop pictured here. So of course, sugar sweetened beverages. Some things that we might not always be as aware of are things like sports drinks and canned tea drinks. Those can often contain a lot of added sugars in them. Things like jelly and syrup, and then foods that have trans fats. So a lot of places have been shifting away from uh, products that contain trans fats. Trans fats. There's even been some legislation around this because we know that it increases the risk for for example, cardiovascular disease. But trans fats is found in margarine, microwave popcorn, refrigerated biscuits and dough, and even in non-dairy coffee creamers. So these foods are characteristic of a Western diet. And when I say Western, I'm referring to basically the Western hemisphere and United States, Canada, Mexico, South America, Europe. So Western diets are really associated with chronic inflammation, and that's because the Western diets are high in these saturated fats, the processed foods, refined sugars, and they're associated with a persistent low-grade inflammation. We've already gone over the role of healthy inflammation and also talked about the consequences of chronic inflammation, which can contribute to diseases like cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and cancer. And I'm going to go through a few mechanisms. This won't be too heavy on this, just a couple slides, and then we'll get into more of the anti-inflammatory dietary pattern and what can you do about all of this to reduce inflammation. But I think it's important just to understand some of the mechanisms behind this and what's happening within the body. So some of the key mechanisms are oxidative stress, intestinal microbiota dysbiosis. That basically just means that there's an imbalance in the microbes that are in the intestinal tract, and that can cause inflammation. And then also immune dysregulation. And then there's this term here that says oxidative stress. So this is a really important concept. But basically, oxidative stress happens when there's an imbalance in the body between something called reactive oxygen species. It's abbreviated here as ROS. So reactive oxygen species production, and then the body's ability to be able to detoxify or quench that reactive oxygen species. And so things like saturated fats and trans fats, those increase reactive oxygen species production in the body, and they impair the body's innate antioxidant defenses. And so you can see in here that oxidative stress happens when there's an imbalance between this production of free radicals, which result from that oxidative reactive oxygen species, and then the antioxidants, both inherent within the body and then the antioxidants that we eat from our food. And so normal cells, you can see here, there's a normal cell, and then that cell is attacked by free radicals, and then that causes damage and eventually the death of the cell. And over time, again, this will then damage tissues and organs, the more and more cells that are exposed to this process. And so the impacts of oxidative stress on health are that, again, it causes damage to cells and tissues and organs, and it leads to the release of pro-inflammatory cytokines. And these are like chemical messengers within the body. So some of those, it's a little technical here, but things like IL-6 and TNF-alpha, that stands for tumor necrosis factor alpha. The reactive oxygen species overview again. So it's a highly reactive molecule that's formed as a byproduct of cellular metabolism, but also foods can contribute to a higher production of that reactive oxygen species. And the body tries to really tightly regulate this, but it can cause injury when there's an imbalance again of that the oxidative stress and the antioxidants. And then again, that imbalance can result in the development of chronic disease, as I mentioned a few times already. And in this graphic here, you can see the Western diet, the highly processed foods generating the reactive oxygen species. And then you can see the antioxidants here that can help to quench or stop that process from happening. And so things like vitamin C and vitamin E, carotenoids, can help. These are sources of antioxidants within the diet. And so we'll talk in more detail about those as we continue. Okay, so some things that you can do at home right away is thinking about the way that you're preparing your foods. So the cooking method can have an impact on inflammation. The healthier cooking methods are going to be things like baking and steaming or fast stir frying. Those are preferable. So those are healthier than deep frying or grilling. And so those like baking and steaming, those help to reduce inflammation. Now, things that can increase inflammation are things like grilling meat. And so what happens is that when we cook red meat on the grill, we can create cancer-associated compounds. And the process of what happens is that the fat from the meat drips onto the flames, and then the flames can bust that fat and create harmful compounds that then go into the meat, and then we eat it, and then it gets into our body. Luckily, this does not happen with when we grill vegetables or low-fat fish, which are safe. Okay, and microwaving. So for some, this is a controversial topic. I know my wife and I talk about this often. I'm not against the microwave, but anyway, so microwaving actually it just activates the water molecules in the food, and there have been actually a lot of studies that have looked at uh, the quality and the nutrients and stuff in microwaving food, and it seems to be okay. So um, microwaving is okay. It's healthier than frying or grilling things at a high heat, especially when you're short on time. And so also you want to be mindful of sauces and dressings. So these can often contain high levels of like sugar or trans fats or sodium. So you want to just be mindful of the kinds of sauces and dressings that you're using. And I apologize that it's so dark. I guess that's maybe helping a little bit, but kind of blurring my background. So I'm just gonna turn it off. Actually, okay,
Yeah.
maybe I'll.
Yeah, Dr. Cadro, you can just turn your camera off, maybe. That might work.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, no problem. So let me see if I can bring up the toolbar again here. Let's see. Uh, Sorry. Okay, video, and then I just need to share again.
We can still see your
Oh,
slides.
you can still see it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, but I can't see
Hmm.
it. Here
Oh,
we go.
okay.
There I can. Okay, I'm good. I'm good. So you can still see the slides?
We can still see the slides. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So the next one here is processed foods, and it's important to, you may already be doing this, and if you are, that's fantastic, but reading labels and just getting comfortable with looking at the labels on food products. So a lot of prepared foods contain added sugars. Some of these, appear under various names, so it can be things like cane crystals or crystallized cane sugar. And then other ingredients that end in OSE can often be a sugar containing ingredients. And so you want to check for things like also partially hydrogenated oils, that can, indicate the presence of different trans fats and things that can be avoided or that should be avoided. All right, and then we're finally here. So let's now talk about the anti-inflammatory eating pattern. So I think it's important to note that there's not one specific anti-inflammatory diet, although it's often talked about like that, but it's more of just an overall healthy eating pattern that reduces inflammation and promotes health. And we'll talk about some specific foods that can help us to do that. But let's just think about the big picture first. And so an anti-inflammatory dietary pattern is going to be one that's high in vegetables, fruits, and whole grains with moderate amounts of fish and legumes. If you do eat meat, if you do eat fish, and if you eat red meat, then it's going to be low in red meat. If you eat more of a vegetarian diet, then of course you would have just more of a high vegetables, fruits, whole grains, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices, and other sources of omega-3 rich foods, but that we'll talk about. And then a pro-inflammatory diet, which I hope you sort of got are familiar with now, which is one that's more high in sweets and refined sugars, red and processed meat, and then snacks and sugary drinks, and one that's low in vegetables, fruits, and whole grains. So here are some of the basics of an anti-inflammatory eating pattern. We've already, mentioned some of these before, but you could think about, aiming for 3 cups of veggies, 2 cups of fruit per day, and then think about color throughout the week. So trying to include all types of color groups throughout the week in the foods that you're consuming. Things like leafy greens can be added to soups or salads, and then spices like turmeric and garlic and ginger, and really so many. There's so many spices that are just filled with anti-inflammatory and antioxidant compounds, and so these are a really rich source of anti-inflammatory compounds that you can include in your diet. And then in terms of the fats, there's mono and polyunsaturated fats. Omega 3s are part of the polyunsaturated fat family. And all of these mono and polyunsaturated fats are going to help reduce inflammation. And these are found in things like vegetables and fish, so kale, seaweed, salmon, and sardines, nuts and seeds. So for vegans or vegetarians, these are great sources of these healthy fats. So walnuts, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, chia seeds, even hemp seeds and avocados. And then healthy oils. There's a lot of varieties here, but some of the main staples would be like olive oil and flaxseed oil for dressings or just to add on top of different foods. And if you do eat meat, and it's an option for you than a grass-fed option. So as we've talked about, like leafy greens, they contain healthy fats, and so when the animals eat those instead of other types of grains and refined carbohydrates and things like that, then the fats that are in the meat and the compounds that are in the meat are healthier for you than the factory-fed meat. Okay, are now one of my favorite foods. I'm going to highlight, a few specific foods, and then we'll continue on. So there's to talk about some other important topics here. But blueberries. So blueberries are an incredible food. They're really high in antioxidants, and they immediately increase the antioxidant activity in the blood. And so when you think about that, really, the blueberries are very helpful for the blood vessels themselves, but everywhere that blood is carried. So every organ and tissue in the body can benefit from having those antioxidants. And so they're really helpful for the brain, for the eyes, for heart health, and they potentially lower cancer risk. And so they contain a lot of phytochemicals with anti-cancer potential, and this is being looked at in research. So some of the important nutrients and phytochemicals that are in blueberries are things like dietary fiber and vitamin C. And then there's anthocyanins and flavonols. And then a lot of other sort of complicated names, but stilbenes and phenolic acids, chlorogenic acids, flavones and flavin 3-ols, and things like proanthocyanidins and elagitannins. These are all, I mean, it's just incredible. There's like, thousands of compounds in these natural foods, but they've all been sort of studied, and they all have various benefits. But the proanthocyanins, those are found in all different types of berries. Those are particularly helpful for reducing inflammation and for cardiovascular and brain health. A quick preparation tip. So frozen blueberries, they're quickly preserved after picking, and they retain their nutritional value. They're also, very economical. And so if you shop at, a big name or big box store where you can get, bulk quantities of things, then buying frozen blueberries and keeping them in the freezer is a nice way to get those all year round. Another food in the berry family here are raspberries, and I'm just highlighting this in relation to cancer, but it's rich in dietary fiber and the elagitannin compounds, It's again rich in antioxidants and supports the antioxidant and anti-inflammatory defenses in the body, and it may also help to reduce the risk of cancer. There's some additional research that's being done at this to look at individual genes and the gut microbiome and how this may confer some benefits for different people based on some of the genotypes with raspberries. And inside of raspberries, similar to blueberries, you have dietary fiber, you have vitamin C, anthocyanins, elagitannins, phenolic acids, and a quick preparation tip for the raspberries. So you can use frozen raspberries to make a healthier raspberry yogurt. You can defrost berries for 30 seconds in a microwave. You can stir them into unsweetened yogurt and enjoy as a treat with less added sugar. And this name here at the bottom, American Institute for Cancer Research, I'll list it later in the slide deck, but it's a phenomenal resource for evidence-based nutrition related to cancer, both for healthcare professionals, but also just for everybody, for the general public too. So I encourage you to check out that website. Okay, and then the next topic here, we did introduce omega-3 fatty acids a little bit before, but we're going to go into just a little bit more detail here. And probably as I'm talking, you'll have some time to look at the graphic and look at some of the foods and the amounts of omega-3s that are in these foods. And so omega-3s are found in fatty fish. But interestingly enough, in terms of the aquatic areas or environments, so it's actually the algae in the oceans that produce the long chain omega-3 fatty acids like EPA and DHA. And then when the fish eat those, they incorporate those into their tissues. And so so you can actually, you can eat various seaweeds and algae, and they also make, supplements out of those as well. And so for vegans and vegetarians, there are lots of options to obtain even those long chain omega-3s. And then the plant-based omega-3s, things like from land plants, are like nuts and seeds, canola oil, and these provide nutrients and vitamin E as well, which are good inflammation fighters. And so basically in a lot of the nuts and seeds like chia seeds, and flax seeds, that's a short chain omega-3 called ALA is the acronym for it. And the body can actually take that ALA and make then EPA and DHA. So the body has enzymes that can take that ALA and add another carbon to it, another double bond, and make EPA, and then do the same thing and make it a little bit longer and turn it into DHA. So it doesn't just have to be from fish. All right, and then vitamin C. This is a powerful antioxidant. Before we talked about reactive oxygen species and then the balance of that ROS and the antioxidants within the body. And so when you're eating foods that are rich in antioxidants, you help your body to balance the reactive oxygen species with the antioxidants and to help to balance that inflammatory response. And so here are some foods, right? More vitamin C than an orange. That's interesting. So things like strawberries and pineapple, bell peppers. These are all really good sources of vitamin C. So citrus fruits, bell peppers, as we mentioned. And so, yeah, I mean, these vitamin C, it helps combat the cellular wear and tear that triggers inflammation. And then we have polyphenols. And polyphenols are a natural inflammation protector. And the various sources of polyphenols, so the Mediterranean diet and similar eating plans emphasize a lot of these foods, but they're found in colorful plant-based foods, in whole grains, and in olive oil. And then some additional sources of polyphenols are things like coffee and tea and dark chocolate. And you can see in this graphic here has some other sources of polyphenols. You can see cloves listed, soybeans are there, sweet cherries, apples, my favorite. Of course, I love blueberries, all the berries, but I do enjoy the apples. And then flaxseed here as well. So polyphenols, and there's just extensive research on polyphenols. And anyway, it's just very interesting. I often spend a lot of time trying to learn about this. I can spend a lifetime just continuing to learn about all these amazing compounds within foods. And then we'll shift to talking about the gut. So the intestines and gut health really matters, and we for balancing inflammation in the body, and we want to support a beneficial bacteria in the gut. And so there's two main concepts here that we want to understand. The first is probiotics, and those are foods that contain live microorganisms that are healthy or commensal bacteria, things like lactobacillus and bifidobacteria. So the next time you buy a food that, like kimchi or sauerkraut or Greek yogurt or something, you can look and see if it says if it contains live cultures. You'll often see lactobacillus bacteria and bifidobacteria. Those are both really good. There's, of course, many other types, but those are some of the common ones that are in the probiotic-rich foods. And then prebiotics, basically, this is like dietary fiber, which are things that our digestive system, like our own enzymes, can't break down some of these fibers, but the microbes in our gut actually can break down those fibers, and they use them as food, and then they do amazing things with them. So they produce various kinds of vitamins for us. They also produce things like butyrate, and the bacteria that produce butyrate, so when that butyrate gets released into the gut, it causes an anti-inflammatory response locally within the gut, but it can also get absorbed systemically and go around the body and have an anti-inflammatory response in the body. So when we eat plant foods and things that contain dietary fiber, which really comes from all different kinds of plant foods, and we feed our gut microbiome, and then we help to support a healthy gut bacteria and have more of an anti-inflammatory effect within our body. And it's also related to the immune system as well. So 60% of the immune system is in the gut, and having a healthy gut microbes helps us with our immune system as well, and having a healthy immune system and inflammatory responses. Okay, so just a few more slides here, and then we'll open it up to some questions. So the ways that you can reduce inflammation. So the Mediterranean diet, I know we talked really that there's not really one anti-inflammatory diet, but there's different kinds of eating patterns. And the Mediterranean diet is rich in a lot of these foods that we've talked about. And so it's highly effective for controlling inflammation. It focuses on foods that are high in omega-3s, vitamin C, polyphenols, fiber-rich foods, and other inflammation-fighting nutrients. And then you want to just start gradually and begin, substituting things. So you can see in this chart on the side, so instead of a charcuterie board that maybe has like a lot of processed meats or things like that, you can have like vegetable slices with hummus. Instead of French fries, try baked sweet potatoes. Instead of sauces with butter or cheese, try olive oil and vinegar and herbs. And then instead of grilled burgers, maybe try grilled eggplant or grilled portobello mushroom. And then instead of baking cakes and pies or bakery cakes and pies, try things like dark chocolate, with raspberries or grilled peaches. Those can be some easy substitutions to begin experimenting with this. And if you're already doing it, fantastic, then just keep up the good work. I love this graphic. I think it's just, as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And this picture also has some helpful words on it too. But it's great. This comes to us from the Harvard School of Public Health, and it's the Harvard Healthy Eating Plate. And I think it's just a good graphic to keep in mind. It's very simple. So when you're thinking about organizing your plate, half the plate is basically fruits and vegetables, and then you have whole grains and then a healthy protein. And just remember, there's lots of different protein sources in addition to meat. As I'm sure you're learning about in the Plant Powered Challenge, there's protein in all sorts of foods. There's protein in whole grains, in beans, and nuts and seeds. So a lot of options there. Tofu, tempeh, all sorts of stuff. So I just hope that this is a healthy graphic for you. It's got a lot of good information on it. All right, and then The next one is I just wanted to share this because Mm, behavior change is uh, it's a process. I just want you to understand that changing your behaviors, again, if you're already doing a lot of these things, that's awesome. But there may also be people out there that maybe eating a Western style diet, but want to begin to change their diet and eat healthier. And I just want you to know that there is a process to it and there's a science to it even. It follows a predictable series of stages and processes, and it can be applied to a variety of health behaviors such as like smoking cessation, exercise, healthy eating, and stress management. And it's called, this is a long name, but it's called the Trans Theoretical Model of Health Behavior Change. And it was developed, actually, this paper from 1997 was like the first to sort of introduce this concept. But anyway, you start with pre-contemplation, and that's when somebody's not even really aware that anything needs to change. But then something happens, and people begin thinking that they want to make a change. And then they begin preparing for that change, and then they begin acting on that change. And then hopefully right after they begin acting on it, then they continue to do that, and they're maintaining those behaviors. But then as part of the process, there's always the relapse or the lapse. Like you eat the junk food, engage in some unhealthy practices, and then you go around the cycle again. And hopefully you can turn it around quickly and say, oh, okay, I realize that I lapsed and I want to get back. And so this process can go over and over and over, and you can work with people to help you in this process. And so like Chris, for example, she's a health coach. I'm sure that she's familiar with these concepts in behavior change. And so just having like a healthcare professional who can guide you, or whether that's also could be a family member or a good friend or a cheerleader or somebody who's helping you to be accountable, and helping you to stay motivated, can be really powerful. And so I just wanted to share this model because I think it's helpful. And then the last thing is the recipe that I wanted to share, which comes to us from the Fred Hutch Cancer Center in Seattle, Washington. I used to work there before I moved back to Michigan this summer, and it's just a great place. And their medical nutrition therapy services has a lot of awesome, information, and they do have also a lot of their stuff, on the website too. But anyway, so you can access it. But they have this great super green kale and avocado salad, and so it starts with kale and then some lemon juice, a little bit of salt, avocado, currants, golden raisins, pecans, and olive oil. And then it gives you some instructions here. So you chop the kale up, you put it in a large bowl, and then add the lemon juice and salt, and then let that soften the kale, let it rest for a few minutes, and then add your avocados and your additional ingredients, and then just sort of lightly mash the avocado and toss it, and then dress it with some black pepper and olive oil, and you're good to go. And so that's what I wanted to share. And then some additional evidence-based nutrition resources. I already mentioned the American Institute for Cancer Research, AICR.org. I definitely encourage you to check out that website. We talked about the Harvard Healthy Eating Plate. There's myplate.gov. And then also Cook for Your Life. That's a website from Fred Hutch. It's more cancer focused, but they do have great recipes for healthy eating, anti-inflammatory eating, and also lots of articles and stuff. And then the Corewell Health system as well. There's going to be resources for you there. So there's a few things to check out, and I hope that this is just the beginning of your journey into plant-based eating, anti-inflammatory eating, and I would just like to thank you, very much for being here, for the time, for the attention, and for the opportunity to speak with you. And I would like to thank Mariah and everyone involved in making the Plant Powered Challenge possible. And that's the end. So thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Cadro. And once you turned the camera off, we were able to hear you great and everything was good. So you can just kind of keep that going. And
Okay, okay, sounds good. And I apologize for the audio and video challenges at the beginning.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, sometimes that happens, right? It's technology.
Yeah,
We have this love-hate relationship. Um, but all of those slides were fantastic. I especially love the TTM model. Obviously, that speaks to my heart. And you're right about lifestyle behavior change. It's a journey for sure. So
yeah.
making some changes in their dietary patterns to a more anti-inflammatory diet, it's super important. And the more we know and really understand why we should make some of these changes, the more likely we are to do it. So I think the presentation was great in explaining a lot of that. We do have some really good questions. So I'm going to read a couple and see, see how we can help people here. One person asked, where does sourdough, homemade with King Arthur all-purpose flour and bread flour, fit into the anti-inflammatory diet? And that they've heard mixed information about sourdough. What do you know about that?
That's a great question. And a couple of things. So one is that the sourdough will often have well, I mean, I think sort of by definition, it has those probiotics, in it. And so sourdough can be healthy, for that reason. And then I actually took a bread making class as an elective and spent a weekend making sourdough bread. And the way that we did it was we combined different types of flour so that the bread had ultimately a brownish color to it. And so
Mm.
my recommendation for sourdough would be to combine some whole wheat flour with the white flour so you get a higher dietary fiber content to it. Because that's really what we want is like foods that have higher dietary fiber. If it's just all white flour, although it may be healthier than other types of breads that have a lot of other, like possibly trans fats or other types of harmful, potentially harmful ingredients in there, the sourdough is definitely less ingredients and probably more healthy. But if you can also combine the types of flour to get some more fiber in it, and it would be, even more healthy. If you end up just doing the plain white flour sourdough, then what I would recommend is when you eat that, eat it with some fiber-rich foods. So maybe that's like spreading half an avocado on it, or having it with hummus, or some other kinds of beans, or vegetables and things that are higher in fiber that can buffer that spike in your sugar and help to regulate that more.
Perfect. That's great advice. Yeah, Field and Fire, for those of you who are local in Grand Rapids, has a great sourdough multi-grain bread too. So if you're looking
Oh,
for
awesome.
something with more fiber, yeah. Next up, do you recommend using a turmeric or curcumin supplement with a healthy diet to help with inflammation?
Not across the board. I definitely recommend it a lot in the clinic, and it can be it can be wonderful, and it can be really helpful to folks. And so my recommendation would be to, if you're interested in taking it, to talk with your a healthcare provider, because if you're on certain medications, you want to make sure that you screen it for interactions with those medications. And then also, hopefully, the healthcare provider has some knowledge about the different forms of it. For example, like combining turmeric with black pepper helps the absorption.
Mm-hmm.
And then curcumin is an active compound within turmeric that's a little bit more pharmaceutical-like in its activity. It's better absorbed, but also has like a higher anti-inflammatory effect. So there's a lot of things to consider there. And yeah, so I know supplements are available over the counter. In general, it's pretty safe, but it can have some different types of interactions with medications. And then, I mean, I can go on and on, but because I work with turmeric a lot, but like, in rare cases, it can elevate liver enzymes. So you just want to make sure that you're following up with a healthcare provider. And then when you do go in for exams and, appointments and stuff, just let them know if you are taking a turmeric, and they
Mm-hmm.
can add it to your med list so they're aware of it. But I like to, like, I've actually been putting just turmeric spice in my smoothies in the morning, and a little bit of black pepper, and that's how I use it. And then adding it to foods and stuff, and curry and everything. So yeah, you can sort of do all of the above, and if you do supplement with it, just do it in a safe way, and try to
Mm-hmm.
involve your healthcare team.
That's great. And then there's another question to sort of piggyback on that about
Hmm.
supplements. I
Hmm.
know it's best to get omega-3 from food, but
Hmm.
wondering if supplements are okay to ensure adequate amounts of DHA, ALA, and DPA.
Yeah, supplements can definitely have their role. And the amazing thing now is that we can also test. And so you can also talk to your healthcare provider about running an omega-3 test and a fatty acid test in your blood, in your red blood cells to see like, okay, what do your red blood cells look like in terms of their fatty acid composition? And are you getting enough omega-3? And what does your omega-3 to 6 ratio look like? And so that would be one way to sort of guide that process. Now, if you're just taking it for general health, then I would suggest, sort of not exceeding 1,200 milligrams or so of EPA and DHA. Higher doses in people who do not have cardiovascular disease. In some instances, those higher doses can be associated with the development of arrhythmias, like which are abnormal heart rhythms in healthy people who are supplementing with like high doses of omega-3s. And so but people who have cardiovascular disease or other types of inflammatory conditions, supplementing with omega-3s can be really helpful. So again, I would, consider working with your healthcare provider to talk about the risks and benefits of omega-3 supplementation and see if
Hmm.
it's a good fit for you. And then also
Okay.
you can, yeah, get a lot of it in your diet. So,
Yep, absolutely. Gosh, there's a few more good questions.
okay, sure.
Do plant-based or nut-based yogurts contain probiotics too?
Yes, they do.
Okay, perfect.
And yeah, most
Hmm.
of those are on the label. I mean, they will. It's like it should be labeled because a lot of, I mean, companies want to market this stuff too. So, but also, it might be required to put it on there. But yeah, you can just look on the label and it should say, contains live probiotic cultures. And like I mentioned before, different types of lactobacillus and bifidobacteria are going to be the most common found in those.
Okay. What are your thoughts about how nightshade vegetables affect chronic systemic inflammation? I've heard and read that they could increase inflammation.
I would say that uh, this is an it's an interesting question. I don't know how much in the scientific literature this topic has really been thoroughly investigated and interrogated to really know. And then we certainly, I mean, if you just look at like the Mediterranean diet, like we talked about, for example, has a lot of tomatoes in it. Like let's take Italy for example. Italian cuisine has a lot of tomatoes in them. Tomatoes have antioxidants like lycopene, which are associated with a lot of health benefits. And so I would not across the board cut nightshades out of your diet based on the idea that they're going to increase inflammation. If, on the other hand, you have a chronic inflammatory condition, or you have chronic pain, or you have an autoimmune disease, and you're already in a lot of pain, then maybe working with a healthcare provider and either doing some, I don't know, food sensitivity testing, or even just an elimination diet and like eliminating nightshades for a few weeks or a month and see like does your pain improve and does your inflammation improve. It may be worth trying. But just as a general rule, like cutting those foods out, I definitely would not do that because there's a lot of healthy foods in the nightshade family.
Absolutely. And then somebody wanted you to address salt and inflammation, maybe added salts and things
Yeah.
like how does salt affect inflammation?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I will have to be honest, I need to look into the mechanisms of how salt increases inflammation. But I can here's one hypothesis that I'm going to put forward. Salt makes us retain water. And when we in salt, so when we retain water, we're retaining fluid, and that increases the fluid, like the fluid within the blood vessels. So, for example, like the blood volume. And the blood pressure is regulated by multiple mechanisms, but part of that is the amount of fluid or like the blood volume. And so if you're eating a lot of salt and that's increasing your retention of water and then increasing the blood pressure, that is going to cause that can injure because that increased fluid can the fluid dynamics the within the arteries and the capillaries can, especially in places like the blood vessels and also in the kidneys with like the really tiny blood vessels and tiny capillaries and things like the eye, that increased fluid volume can damage the walls of the arteries. And like we talked about in the beginning of the presentation, inflammation is part of healing damaged tissue. And so, I think that probably the relationship with salt and inflammation is somehow related a lot with the blood pressure and sort of
Mm-hmm.
the damage that can occur within the blood vessels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, I'm sure there's a lot more that we could talk about there too. Um, and then maybe like there's just one question that I was trying to answer on my own, just
Okay.
about polyphenols in coffee specifically, good alternative to sweeten it without using sugar or creamers that are unhealthy. I personally use like some cinnamon in my coffee.
Nice.
Yeah, like I'll either put it in the coffee grounds or once the coffee
Mm-hmm.
is brewed, add
Mm-hmm.
some cinnamon. When we were talking about turmeric and black pepper earlier, I have a friend who has mixed together a little, like very little amount of black pepper, but some turmeric and some other spices in like a little shaker that she puts in her coffee,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
to get it that way. But any other recommendations you might have?
Yeah, those are great. I think about chai tea and chai tea spices, like spices that are added to chai tea.
Mm-hmm.
Things like cardamom and like allspice and cloves. Those kind of things can also flavor coffee and are often added in a lot of the Middle Eastern cultures. They add those things to coffee, and so that can help to sweeten it as well. And then yeah, like I mean stevia, there's liquid stevia if you like that. That's I guess kind of like a very quick way, but
Mm-hmm.
to do it. But there are a lot of as you mentioned different seasonings that have more of like a sweet kind of a
Mm-hmm.
flavor that can be added. So
Yeah, good, good. Okay, I think we're about out of time. But
yeah.
we have had like a great presentation here tonight. Thank you so much, Dr. Cadro, and just for all of your knowledge. We will be sharing, we recorded the webinar, so we will be emailing it, the link to the recording for people to watch if they missed it or rewatch to just maybe they want to rehear a concept that was mentioned during the presentation as well. But I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. And thank you, Dr. Cadro, for taking time out of your week to deliver this information to our patients and just share all of this great knowledge that you have. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and you are most welcome. And thank you again to all of you and to everybody for being here. And I wish you all the best. And I really enjoyed our time together.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.